The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 144 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Oh my goodness, hey, if I sound a little different this week, that is because I am sitting in a Barnes & Noble, or just at the edge of a Barnes & Noble, between Barnes & Noble and the mall, hoping that some of the background noise doesn't come through. I don't have my microphone with me today, but I had my father's having a major surgery today, and so I am in the area to help him and my mom. And, I thought I'd go ahead and work on this and get things prepared for the most recent episode. And, it just kind of seemed a little fitting that I would go ahead and just record this and see how it went while sitting near a Barnes & Noble. So seems a little fitting, doesn't it? So hopefully I don't sound too odd. But as I said, this is episode 144, and this week we are firing up a stogie to have a sit and chat with multi-genre and award-winning author Gary Phillips. Gary was a blast to speak with as we discussed things like getting used to the back and forth of this pandemic, finding inspiration in social unrest. He has some characters that were inspired through the original, like the Rodney King events back in the 90s, working in different genres and media to help inform and keep his writing fresh. And, just so many other things. And we even get off on a little sidetrack bar discussing cigars. But it's lots of fun. It was a real good time talking with Gary. Plus, he has an infectious laugh that is sure to bring a smile to your face. All of this plus a gripping sample chapter coming to you in mere minutes. So stay tuned for that. It's coming right up. First, I want to thank my sponsor, Scrivener. As always, they are my favorite writing software. And, here I am. Like I said, I'm sitting outside this Barnes & Noble. I've been working on this episode. I've been working on another episode. And in between, I've been going back in. I take turns. I go in and I work on my current project, trying to get those final edits done on Novel Idea. And all of that editing, whether it's editing on that story or writing something fresh in one of the other stories I'm working on, it's all done in Scrivener. Because as I've mentioned before, when it comes to Scrivener, I have all of my stories are in there. And it doesn't matter which one I pull up. I have the character notes, I have the background information, the settings, everything is in that corkboard and ready to go for me whenever I need it. And I can move things around as needed. Say what's in chapter 5 no longer works and needs to come later in the book, I can move that right over. Chapter 5 is now chapter 10, or vice versa. There's just so many things that you can do in Scrivener. Hey, listen to this advertisement for our sponsor and make sure you're listening for the coupon code that's going to save you 20% off the regular desktop version.
Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers.
All right. Yes, once again, thank you so much to Scrivener. I love having them as a sponsor and just love using that product. I also want to thank my podcast networks. Pop Goes the Culture Network. You can click on the link in the show notes or head on over to popgoestheculture.com, depending on whether or not you're driving. Don't do any of this when you're driving, okay? Don't reach over there. Stay off your phone. You can listen to me. You can listen to the episode and listen to their shows, but don't click any buttons while you're driving, all right? Anyway, but yeah, Pop Goes the Culture Network is your home to about 10 different pop culture related shows, movies, actors, wrestling, anything in that pop culture genre. I mean, even toys and, the clothing from back in the day, back in the 70s, 80s, whatever, that's what they're talking about. Even in the 90s, it's all available to you. Lots of fun stuff. So make sure you click that link in the show notes when you can and check out popcultureculture.com. And I love being a part of that network, and I think you're going to really enjoy checking them out. I also want to thank my other podcast network that we are so happy to be a part of, which is Project Entertainment Network. Home to more than 35 different shows with a wide range of subjects, from shows on writing, on books, on horror, movies, monsters, faith, opinions, comedy debates. Just, it goes on and on. They have so many wild shows on there. Even baseball. There's even a baseball show on there now. So many great shows. Hey, check out this advertisement for one of those wonderful shows on the Project Entertainment Network.
This is Jim Adams from Monster Attack. Hey, if you remember that monster movie from your childhood that got it all started for you, the one that really got you interested in monster movies, horror movies, sci-fis, and cult films, then you're going to want to listen every week to Monster Attack. We look at some of our favorite monster movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. With new episodes uploaded every Monday, it's Monster Attack, exclusively on the Project Entertainment Network.
And once again, that is just one of the more than 35 shows located over on the Project Entertainment Network. So click that link in the show notes and find out about all of them. Hey, make sure you are following all of us, both networks and our sponsors, and this show included, on social media. We're all available to you on Facebook, Twitter, and I know we're on Instagram as well. The Sample Chapter Podcast is also on Instagram. So just look us up. You can find me there at Sample Chapter Podcast on any of those. You can make sure you're hitting like. Any of the podcast platforms that you're listening to, would really appreciate a star rating. And if you want to leave a review, then that'd be great. And don't forget to share your favorite episode with friends. Whenever you find an author that you are really excited about, I really appreciate that. And of course, whenever I find people talking about the show or whatever, I will make sure and give you a shout out on the next episode. If you want to reach out to the show, you can do so via email at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave me a voicemail by calling 660-851-1146. And as always, leave me a voicemail that I like, and I will make sure and play that on an upcoming episode. All right, without further ado, it is time to get us on over to our outstanding conversation with the incredible Gary Phillips. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sample Chapter Podcast. This week, we are going to be sitting down with author Gary Phillips. Gary has written novels and short stories featuring private investigator Ivan Monk. He writes on politics and pop culture for places as the LA Times, the LA Watt Times, Rap Pages, San Francisco Examiner, and more. He occasionally loses money at the poker table, which I can relate to, watches his kids play sports, and finds that walking the dog is a fine excuse to light up a stogie. I'm going to love this conversation. Gary, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And yeah, I can tell already we're going to get along real good. So before I start asking you cigar and poker questions, how are you doing? And are you getting along fine during this pandemic?
Well, I guess we've kind of, as everybody has, you kind of settle into the new, I guess it's the new groove, right? I mean, so what, so what choice do you have but to sort of figure out, and I guess partly because, being a writer, it's somewhat solitary to begin with, but then like I can't go to the gym, or I could go to the gym for a while. I'm in LA, so we could go to the gym for a while. Now we can't go back to the gym. Now maybe we can go to the gym again if it's only 1/4 full, and take our temperature and all the things you need to do. Wear your mask, and so I don't know. I guess I just gotten used to the new. Is this the new normal? I guess as everybody has, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I was. I was doing really good there at first, staying in shape, actually getting in better shape. I was really happy. Then I kind of slacked off for a while. I was eating all kinds of things, and then I started getting better recently again. And now the Halloween candy's coming out, and
There you go.
I'm like, oh boy, I'm in trouble again.
Right, I hear you.
One of the highlights about getting to do this show is I get to meet authors all over the world, and so getting to hear about, or getting to talk to brand new to me authors is so incredibly exciting. So I can't wait to hear about Ivan Monk.
Well, I guess the long story short is the first Monk novel. I can't even believe it's been this long, but I guess it's 20, or it's going to come up on 28 years. So the first Monk novel showed up in 94, and that was coming out of the events of 92 here in Los Angeles, the Rodney King riots, the civil unrest, whatever your political bent is in terms of how you, the lens in which you saw that. Mm-hmm. And because my background had been as a labor organizer, and I'd also worked in community groups and worked for nonprofits and what have you. And I kind of had a sort of on the ground look at some of the players who were coming together post those events to try to help rebuild the city, try to move forward in a positive way. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if I could set my character, my private eye character, in the midst of this, and sort of look at the forces on both sides of the law, trying to do things that were, like I said, moving the city forward, and those who maybe had other designs. So with that in mind, that's really how I came up with. I had actually come up with a character before. I should be very clear. I had come up with the character Ivan Monk in a previous novel, which never saw the light of day. Or that is to say, I wrote the novel, but it never was published. But then when the events of 92 happened, I thought, well, I do know, something about that, so I could probably write that. And that book was then subsequently published. Yeah,
and it went on to what, you had 3 sequels, 4 in all.
Yes, 4 in all, and then there's a whole collection of Ivan Monk short stories, and then one of these years, I'm going to get back to getting that 5th Ivan Monk book done.
Oh, fantastic! Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Have you always been a writer? Is this what you've always aspired to, or were you like so many other writers, like burning the midnight oil after working all day?
Yeah, mostly it was that, Jason. I really never. Well, even when I was a kid, I mean, and I should back up and say that my dad was a working class guy, poor boy from a little town in Texas. And he came west. Well, he eventually came west. He went east first, then came west. And my mom was a librarian, and they met out here in L.A. And so, I grew up around books. And even though my dad was not, as we used to say, book learned, he appreciated books. And of course, as I said, my mom was a librarian, so I was always encouraged to read, even as a kid. I mean, I played sports. I played football and this and that in school, in high school and such. But I was always encouraged to read, so I always had a love of reading, or I guess I developed a love of reading. And then, of course, kind of stumbled into the mystery and crime fiction world as well. And then I guess like a lot of folks who read, or I guess like a lot of folks who think about it, at some point it just occurred to me, well, I like this form so much, maybe I should try my hand at writing a book. And but it really wasn't until I was in my early 30s, after, like I said, working a succession of jobs, and even then, I would write. I was young enough I could come home at night, and the kids were small then, and whatever, and then you get them in bed, and then I could write at night, and then that's how I eventually wrote several novels like that, and then I really didn't become full time, or didn't sort of fall into being full time until really maybe about 15 years ago, I think. I've had sort of consulting jobs and freelance jobs since then, but I haven't punched a clock since then, I guess. So what would that be, about 2005? Yeah, about 2005, I think I eventually became more or less what I do now. Wow. And that's impressive, given that, I think a good portion of the authors I've spoken to on here are indie authors who, they're still working the day job, they're still doing things, and really haven't kicked off things until like around that 2010, 2012 timeline, when Kindle really became
the
Yes.
monster that it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but you had a career before this with selling books to the publishers and really making a name for yourself.
Or yes, such as it is. But it's been a roller coaster. Jason. I mean, the like I said, I've been published since '94. I've been published with big houses and small houses in between. One of the it's not a deficit, but certainly one of the angles to being a writer is, it's like, I guess it's like being a long distance runner, right? I mean, you can't really go for the sprints. You can't really go for the quick 40. You got to really be there for the long haul, and which also means that there's going to be times when it's pretty lean. There's times when, maybe not, selling. I've been fortunate to be, I've published, I think about 60 or some odd, short stories. I've worked a little bit in television, just being out of here in Hollywood. So all those things have combined to kind of keep me going. But there's certainly been times when, I have a novel. We're gonna get to that, the Matthew Henson novel, but that's really my first novel, I think, since 2012. I think I've done a lot of stuff in between, but really to get back to publishing a novel, it had been a while. It'd been a little lean. And actually, interesting enough, I'm finishing now the next novel that it's not a sequel, but it's another standalone novel that will be out. Well, I don't even know it's going to be out next year, but I got to turn it in for next year. Yeah.
You certainly have a wide variety of interests: mystery, Western, science fiction, general fiction, horror, and I even see you've got some work in graphic novels. And
yes.
Tons of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that this really helps inform the rest of your work by getting to do something different. Do you feel like it keeps you fresh?
I do. I absolutely feel that. I absolutely feel that. In the end, we're storytellers. You want to tell a story, and I've been blessed that I've been able to tell a story both in visual mediums as well as in the medium of prose. And for sure, one does inform the other. Particularly, I think, the visual medium in terms of the shorthand, because of it's visual. So whether it's a teleplay or a script for a comic book, you're not just the one telling. You're not the only one telling that story, right? And so you use an economy of words, and you kind of learn a kind of brevity of language. And I think that has helped me in the sense of carrying that over into prose. Now, prose, you got a lot more space, and of course, you have to paint, the picture, as they say, right? Whether it's a Western or whether it's, Matthew Henson was set in 1928 in Harlem, during the Harlem Renaissance and the Roaring '20s, and so of course, then you can't be too brief, right? If you describe a car, well, it's a 1928 or a 1927 Duesenberg. Well, then you can describe a Duesenberg because nobody knows what the heck that is, and but you can have a little fun with that, right? Or you describe a very specific event during that time period, or a plane, right? There's a pilot, a woman pilot is one of the characters in the book. So you describe the planes as they existed then, clearly not the planes that we have now. And so I think so there's a balance, right? So there's a balance of trying to be economical with your wording and keep the pacing going and keep things moving, but also then now and then understanding that, particularly, for a readership of today, you want to stop and give a sense of what that time period was like. What are the sights and sounds that your characters are experiencing then that helps inform the story.
And along the way, you've done more than just the one series with Ivan Monk. You've also got Martha Cheney, yep, Essex Man, Nate Hollis, and now you're beginning a new one with Matthew Henson. What is it like to create a new character and a new series? Like, what's that after making so many before? What's this like?
Well, it's very interesting because you're right. This is the first time I have written things that are set in what they call them a period piece. I have written things set in the past before, but this is the first time I've had to stretch, the writing muscle to fill up all those pages you need to tell the novel. And I think, and partly because, kind of like how we've done with Wild Bill Hickok or Belle Starr or the Earp brothers, there's that movie, that John Ford movie from the 50s, right, with James Stewart and John Wayne about, when the legend and the truth collide, you print the legend, right? The man who shot Liberty Valance, right? Right. And so that's it, right? The part of it is about I'm creating a myth. I am taking some real elements from the life of Matthew Henson, who actually had a very interesting life, like a Dickens character. He actually ran away from home from his cruel stepmother at the age of 12 from D.C. and he went back to Baltimore. He was from Maryland originally, and on the docks, and he signed on as a cabin boy, even though he was too young to be a cabin boy then, and came under the tutelage of the kindly old Captain Childs. I mean, it's right out of that kind of novel, but it's actually true. And Captain Childs taught him nautical navigation, and they talked about the classics and this and that, and apparently for a period of time, from I guess about 12 to like he was 17 or 18, until Captain Childs died. Actually, he learned a lot by sailing with this captain, and so some of that is so that's wonderful. Like that's like the stuff of myth. And so that I guess really the answer to the question is I take some of the things that are obviously in the real world for Matthew Henson, and then I put them through the blender. In this case, I put them through the blender of a kind of neo-pulp novel where I'm using some of the devices of 1930s pulp fiction. Specifically, Doc Savage came to mind, as well as then, of course, Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones is a more modern character, but it's a retro character, right? He's set during the 40s, I guess 40s to the 50s, and so again, using some of those tropes of here's this explorer character. A lot of those characters were explorers. Doc Savage was an explorer, etc. And so being able to draw on some of that, as well as an understanding that I was going to again put it through the blender of a kind of revisionist history. So at the end of it, yes, I came out with my character Matthew Henson, who has some relation to the real life Matthew Henson.
Fantastic. So was it like starting a new series? Was it like visiting an old friend, getting back into it? Like the excitement starts to build up?
I think, well, yeah, Jason. Look, in the end, right? You can only write the things that you want to read. So. But I was conscious that there were certain things I was doing in this book, and that hopefully, if I get the chance to write the sequel, that I knew wanted to then carry forward. As an example, it turns out that both Henson and Robert Peary, right, the head of the expedition, and there were several attempts. They made several attempts to get to the North Pole. It was only, I think it was their 7th or 8th attempt when they finally reached the North Pole. Those two, and then the 4 Inuit men who were with them, and I talk about those. And the Inuit guys I talk about as well in the book, and Henson actually did learn some of the Inuit languages, so that's important to know, and that's a great characteristic of a pulp character, right? Mm-hmm. So that I knew there were certain things, for instance, as I was going to say, I guess that Henson, as it turns out, had an Inuit son. Both Peary and Henson had Inuit kids. Yeah. Now, in the real world, neither man saw those kids again once they left Greenland, once they left the North Pole. But in my book, in my version, Henson, when we come to him in 1928, and I shave off some years because I needed him to be a bit younger and a bit more spry than he was actually in 1928, because they reached the pole in 1909, for God's sakes. He has seen his son several times. In my version, he has seen his son several times, and now the kid is a teenager, and he realizes that realizes to himself that I'm not going to be well, they wouldn't use the term absentee father, but essentially I'm not going to be this absentee father. And so part of the thing that's driving him in the book as an emotional kind of thing is that he wants to get back up north to see his kid and be a better father than he's been so far. So it was important for me to give him that kind of characteristic, even though apparently in real life I don't know in real life whether it occurred to him or not, because I've read his book. It was a book published in 1912 called Negro at the North Pole, which was his, not really a biography, but it's kind of his memoir of that time period. And needless to say, in the book, he does not mention the kid. And Perry never mentions the kids, but it's only this man is S. Allen Counter, who was very interesting. He was kind of something of a Hensonologist. And he's the one in his book, White, Black, and Eskimo, where he talks about the children. And in fact, in the 1980s, Professor Counter goes back to Greenland to find the two surviving sons, and who are already in their 80s, and he brings them back to the States to be sort of feted as the sons of these great explorers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. What kind of advice would you give somebody who's just starting off as an author, or they're thinking about doing it?
Well, the best advice is always, I think, two things, right? One is whether you're working full time or part time, whatever it is right now, and the kids, or in my case, like you said, I got the grandkid running around too. You got to be as consistent as you can. If that just means a half a page a day, then that's half a page a day. That's fine. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But then get half a page done, and try not to procrastinate. Just try to, like, every day when I'm working on the novel, as an example, when I'm working on the novel, I try to make my count. Usually my count is 1,200 to 1,500 words a day. Some days, man, the words just flow like from heaven, right? And other days it's like every word I'm etching it in stone. Every word is like, oh my gosh, it's just killing you. So one is just try to be consistent. Really, it's just be consistent. I mean, I that's probably it. Really, more than anything else. I mean, I think writing is a work ethic like anything else, like any other job that we have, and you want to do your job. You take some pride in your work, whatever that work is. And because I've worked blue collar jobs, what have you, man. You just gotta hit that lick. There's no other way around it. I guess that's the really. So the only advice really is to try to be as consistent as you can. I know some people who kind of write in spurts, and I just can't quite. I get it, but to me, I think you just got to try to lay it down, and then at some point you got some pages. At some point you've got some material, right? I mean, and it may take you a while. That's okay, but that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you say, you just keep doing a little bit every day, and eventually you're going to be like, wait a minute, I'm about to write the end.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So for me personally, I'm going to ask, as far as the cigars, do the cigars come while you write, or is it a victory cigar after you're done?
Well, in this time of our coronavirus, I have been paying attention to the fact that you should probably not tempt fate and smoke too much. So I have definitely cut down. But because I used to smoke 2 or 3 a week, right?
Oh yeah,
and it didn't matter, But yes, obviously, kind of what is it like in what was it in Misery, where at the end of it, when he finished the book, he would light up a cigarette or something? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, that's
right, exactly. Mm-hmm. So, and I have to say, Jason, I'm very tempted because where I live in Los Angeles, there is it's funny, you wouldn't think much of it. I live near what they call Koreatown, and there's like just a little liquor store. But in that liquor store is like a little walk-in humidor, and they got like a great selection of cigars. So I'm wow. And this place is like within walking distance of my house, so I have to be very careful, man. That
I don't go
exactly that I don't go overboard, because now I've had a cigar sitting on top of my dresser for a couple of weeks now, so I've been good, right? I've been good, but I've been thinking more and more. Because now I'm working on this new book, and I'm already 3/4 into the book, and I'm going to stop and do some editing and stuff. And so you're right. It's like, shouldn't one treat themselves, once you reach a certain milestone or a certain plateau. So, but I'm cautious too that I don't want to tempt fate and get myself some kind of respiratory problem. So, yeah, I guess you got to balance it.
That's right.
And,
I got to.
Can I ask what kind of cigars do you favor?
Rocky Patel has become my
Yeah.
favorite
Oh,
in the
yeah.
last like 10 years or so. Before
Oh,
then,
there you go.
Yeah. Prior to that, I loved my my Xenos.
Yes. Yeah.
The Davidoff, those. But
Yeah.
the Rocky Patel has just been right there.
There you go. There you go, man. That's great.
How about you?
I used to be big on the Partagas. I used to be big on those. I'm kind of favor the Maduro style, right? The Maduro blend, I guess it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've lately been into this. It's, as far as I can tell, it's a no-name brand, but supposedly, according to what they have on the wrapper around at Jack's Liquor, as I was mentioning, it's a Nicaraguan cigar, and I for the life of me, I don't even think it has a name on it. I think it's like a no-name brand, but it's dark. It's dark. It's Maduro, and I've been quite intrigued with those. And there was another one I really liked, which was oh my goodness, I can't remember now. It was a Churchill kind, but I can't remember. Oh, I know Garcia Vega. No, not Garcia Vega. It's what is the brand? Oh, I can see the label. Before we end, I'll figure out what it was. But yeah.
Yeah, I got to go on a cruise in January. It was my first cruise ever, and we went to Mexico. And while we were there, I was able to. I didn't know, but I was able to go and buy cigars and bring them home.
Yeah.
They were like, oh yeah, no, the embargo has been lifted. You can take as much as 100 Cubans back with you.
Right, there you go. That's right. Yeah,
so those have been very. Those went in my good humidor, and those are waiting for special occasions.
The Cohibas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
But I think I may have to light one up when this episode comes out.
There you go.
In honor of Matthew Henson. And
there you go. Perfect. Absolutely.
Gary, where can people find and follow you?
I'm on Facebook. I don't tweet. Most of the social media stuff I just don't do because it's just so time consuming. It's just, oh my gosh. I do have a website, gdphillips.com, and it's in dire need of updating, but it will get updated. But yeah, so usually it's Facebook or on my website, and invariably, I'm posting little announcements like. So the book, Matthew Henson, was supposed to drop last month. Well, yeah, supposed to drop in July, but because of COVID and because of things got delayed and what have you, just in general, things got pushed back in the publishing, which is whatever. It's going to now drop November 17th. Drops November 17th. And it'll be, it's Polis, which is a small press, but they do get the books out there. They get them in I guess, as bookstores start to open again, they get them out there in Barnes and Noble and what have you. And there'll be both Kindle, of course, trade paper, and there's going to be a limited hardback as well.
Outstanding. All right.
Yeah. Sure.
I'll make sure to have links to all that in the show notes so everybody knows exactly where to go and you can check it out. It looks really exciting. I love the cover on there.
Oh, the cover is wonderful. It's great, man.
Oh my gosh, it's such a throwback.
Exactly.
It really brings me back to my childhood and checking out it doesn't look anything like it, but for some reason I keep thinking of the shadow.
Yeah. But of course, yes. But it evokes some of that. Exactly. Well, that's true. The shadow would invariably be rappelling down from his auto gyro, with his twin.
Yes.
So yes, absolutely. Some of that, like I said, some of Doc Savage as well as some of Indiana Jones. So exactly, evoking that kind of feeling, that kind of time period.
I love it.
Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for me to set aside and try to keep my hands out of the humidor. But we're going to listen. It's time to hand the floor over to our guest, Gary Phillips, with Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem.
So I'm going to read just a bit from the opening chapter, but this gives you a sense of the character, gives you a sense of the place and time, and there is, as Jason advised, a little bit of a action grabber as well. Her tiny eyes blinked rapidly behind the heavy lenses of her glasses. She was on tiptoe looking through the peephole. Yes, she asked, frowning. Then, gasping in disbelief, my goodness, you're him, she exclaimed. I am, ma'am, said the voice familiar to many Harlemites. Bless your heart, she replied. Me and a few of my friends from Our Ladies Auxiliary enjoyed that talk and slideshow about the ancient library at Timbuktu you gave at First Baptist last year. Thank you. Would you mind if I use your living room window? Oh, yes. Come on in, Mr. Henson. She unlatched the door and opened it wide. The elderly, light-skinned black woman wore a quilted housecoat and slippers. Matthew Henson wasn't particularly tall, but at a shade under 6 feet, and what with his sturdy build, he gave the impression of being larger as he regarded the older woman's modest apartment. The diaphanous curtains were iron. The bright white doilies were scattered about. There was a built-in sideboard containing what he presumed were the dishes and the silverware only brought out for her ladies' auxiliary meetings. You look loaded for bear, she said, eyes wide behind her glasses, noting his appearance. He filled the doorway in his working man's clothes, a rope knotted at intervals connected to a grapple coiled around his substantial chest. There was also an ice axe and ulu in the Inuit language, a small utility knife, and other items attached to a custom-made tool belt he had on. He came further into the room, and the older lady quietly closed the door. I'm sorry to intrude on your quietude, Mrs. Silo. The late mister was a railroad man. He traveled all over this country on them rails. She looked off toward a mantel with various framed photos on it, as well as a good-sized Santa Fe Railroad enameled shield. Yes, ma'am. Where would we be without the railroads? He eyed the window across the room, but wasn't going to rush things and make her more nervous, no matter what might be transpiring just below them. He'd learned long ago in far harsher climes to pace himself. Lord, yes, she went on, our people's means of freedom in many ways. Isn't that right? He prayed they weren't about to have a revival. That is so. He inched forward a notch. Would you like some tea? She offered, but instead of the kitchen, she glanced toward her sideboard and its lead glass cabinets. Though I imagine an outdoorsman like yourself might want something a mite more bracing. About that there window, Mrs. Selo. Oh, yes. She started as if waking from slumber. You didn't come here to chit-chat. Maybe some other time when the clock's not against me. She beamed up at him. Really? Would you come back to speak to the auxiliary as my special guest? I would be delighted. The ladies would be beside themselves, Mr. Henson. Matt will do. She clapped her hands together appreciatively. Fine. He went on past her to the window. He undid the lock and slid it up easily. After moving her easy chair and lamp aside, he secured the pronged grapple hook on the frame and sill. The sharp ends dug into the wood and would leave gouge marks, but there was no helping that. Mrs. Selo didn't raise a fuss, being too polite, he figured. Is this a government mission, Mr. Matt? The window asked as he put a leg outside the open window. No, this is a private engagement, Mrs. Selo. I see, she said, her dubiousness evident. Henson was aware that there was a persistent rumor that many believed he was an operative for an outfit called the International Detective Agency. There was no such organization, but he knew the source had been a serialized story in a magazine several years ago called The Black Sleuth. Elements of the popular story got transferred from the page, as these things do, into a speculation in conversations in cafes and beauty salons throughout Harlem and elsewhere. From there, over time, fiction took on the trappings of gossip and always had its own reality. I'm thinking once you're gone, you're not coming back tonight. He was half out the window. Unlikely. How do I get in touch with you? She asked. Just leave a word for me at May's Diner. Over on Lenox? Yes, near 132nd. Now, if you would, once I'm outside, please don't go near the window, he added, figuring she might take a gander as he descended. He also hoped bullets wouldn't be coming through to ruin her nice flooring from the story below. Very well, she said resignedly. He was depriving her of some of the excitement of having Matt Henson in her apartment, but she'd still have more than enough to tell her church ladies. His booted soles firm against the building's bricks, Henson, who slipped on supple seal-skin gloves, held himself in place on the rope a few inches below the older lady's window. He lowered the sash, cognizant the warmth of the day was giving way to the early evening and not everyone liked the cold as he did. From where he was now, the window he wanted was below him to the left. He clambered down and cursed under his breath. The curtains were drawn. No way to tell what was going on inside, except a slight gap between the curtains to show the lights were on. Henson worked the rope around his veined forearm, holding his body in place. The other hand free, he got his axe loose. He had one of his miniature smoke bombs with him, as well as an incendiary type. The latter was based on a grenade developed by the Germans toward the close of World War I. He wasn't of a mind to start a fire in the room beyond, at least if he didn't have to, but better to be prepared. Henson clenched the axe between his teeth and, unlimbering the rope, got both hands on it as he slipped down again. He came to rest just above the curtain window, not worried if those inside detected movement or not. Why did that blowhard Peary always bark? Find a way or make one, Henson. Well, shit. He smiled thinly as he pushed backward once, twice, and on the third time, muttering, whoop, halloo, got enough arc as he swung back toward the building and let go of the rope. His boots and legs burst through the glass. Though it looked like he would land on his butt, the airborne Henson tucked his body into a roll, and he landed nearly in a roll. One side of the curtains ripped from its pole as material caught in the fold of his leg. A hood who'd been sitting in the chair eating a sandwich gaped at the unexpected entrance. He spat roast beef and tomato from his mouth, his hand darting for a .45 in a shoulder holster draped on the back of a chair. He got the gun in his fist, but too late. Henson was upright and sprang on him. You goddamn bastard, the white gunman blared. Jump on this, Henson said as he punched the man in the side of his head. He stumbled sideways, dazed. A pocket door to another room slammed home. A second gunman in a garish tie came out firing a drum-loaded Thompson machine gun. He raked the room in a sweep of bullets. Hunks of wood, cloth, and porcelain flying everywhere as the rounds blistered furniture and exploded the bric-a-brac. Watch where you're shooting, Eddie, the one Henson had struck yelled. He crawled behind a wing-back chair. Oh, stop being a crybaby, Eddie groused. He looked around, not sure where their intruder had gone. There was a swing door to the kitchen and several bullet holes that penetrated the door. That darky must be in there, said the first hood. He's as good as on the slab. Eddie started forward, sent another burst through the door. His companion, gun in hand, joined in. The door now hung loose, the plaster and frame now nearly non-existent. From inside the kitchen, got kicked all the way off and fell on the machine gunner. God dang it, Eddie said, knocking the door away from his body, but Henson had already deployed his smoke grenade, and the thick stuff spread quickly through the compact quarters. The hell, the hood with the .45 said, can't see shit. He waved his hand before his face, seeking to part the pall. The ice hacks whistled through the dissipating cloud, sailing end over end until the blade sunk into the center of his forehead. Eyes rolling back, his brain ceased functioning by the time he collapsed to the floor. The smoke lifted from around the fresh corpse, curling upward to the ceiling like ghostly tendrils. The occupants of the apartment were revealed. Water could be heard dripping from the pan beneath the icebox in the kitchen. Henson stood stock still on the plain carpet. Eddie, positioned just above the archway of the open pocket door, pressed the barrel of his weapon against the side of a pretty woman in a fashionable skirt and midday blouse. You go back and tell Daddy Paradise you failed, Shine. Take another step, and this here fine brown gal gets finillated like Swiss cheese. The girl looked nervous, but not overly so. Henson nodded, cool-headed. They hurt you any, Destiny? Henson asked. Oh, they groused and strutted like roosters do, but nothing that'll give me nightmares. Hey, cut it out. He jabbed the barrel into her for emphasis. You got any idea who I work for, right? Henson said, I know exactly who you work for. Then you best skedaddle. You mess in a white folks' business and you already in way over your head. His gaze flitted toward the dead man, then back to Henson. You're going to pay for what you did. If not in this world, then the next. What? He began, but didn't finish. In a motion that confounded the thug, Henson whipped his empty hand across his body like a magician's flourish. From out of his sleeve flew a shuriken, a throwing star. 2 of its 5 razor-sharp points embedded deep in the wrist holding the Tommy gun. More from surprise than pain, the hood reacted, his grip loosening on his prisoner, though he managed to hold onto his weapon. She drove a heel into his foot, and he gritted his teeth. God damn bitch, he wailed. He twisted, leveling the gun back on her, but Henson had already closed the distance between them. Henson grabbed the barrel as a burst of fire leapt from the Thompson. Rounds ripped into the couch, cotton stuffing erupting from the destroyed cushions. Let go, the hood rasped, hitting Henson in the gut. Surprised, his fist met packed muscle. And just that quick, Henson batted the machine gun away while taking a step back as it fell to the floor. You're going to get yours now, the hoodlum said, his fists up in a boxer stance. I don't need no gat to teach you a lesson. He charged forward, swinging. In 3 blurry moves from Henson, the criminal was down on his back and on the floor, blinking hard at the man standing over him. Face blank, Henson's heel crashed down on his face, sending him under with a broken nose. What was that you did? Destiny Stevenson asked Henson. I've been to prize fights, but I've never seen boxing like that. It's called Wing Chun. What is that? Kind of fighting technique. Chinese style of combat. You learned it in Chinatown? China, he said tersely. He gathered up her jacket, purse, and cloche hat and handed them to her. Like the man said, we better skedaddle. He also retrieved his axe and throwing star. My father sent you? Yes. They were at the door. More than one head poked out of an apartment in the hallway, then retreated. Stevenson pointed at the throwing star. Henson slipped back up his sleeve, securing it in place. That part of that wing chop chop? The throwing star was of Japanese origin, but it was better not to be too literal. Yes, he answered. He undid a gunny sack from his tool belt and put his belt, axe, his remaining firearm, and a few other items inside. He carried it that way, headed toward the rear stairwell. You're not part of Father's following, are you? How can you tell? You don't have that glazed over look they get when his name is mentioned. He chuckled as they descended. He has his ways. A lot of people respect him. Ain't that something?
Dig it, baby. That was Gary Phillips reading a sample chapter from his new book, Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem. The book comes out November 17th. It is available right now for pre-order, so make sure you get your copy. I'm going to get mine, and I cannot wait to dive into this. Hey, don't forget to click the link in the show notes for that pre-order for more about Gary Phillips. Also, don't forget the links for our podcast friends and sponsor alike. And while you're in there, as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out later this week when I'm back with Jabe Stafford with his debut novel, Ales, Agents, and Alchemy. See you in a couple days, folks. Take care.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.